They said that the video was phony and that Camron would never cross that line. But then the audio came out uncut and unfiltered. And believe me when I say that it did more than simply reveal Chrissy. It destroyed everything she had been trying to hide. What did she say? Nothing. The worst part is that Cam purposefully recorded it. Major just acknowledged using Jim Jones as a pawn while skulking around behind the scenes for years. This isn't love or hip-hop drama. Rather, it's courtroom-level betrayal, with burner phones, studio receipts, and a voice memo that might destroy a whole legacy. Jim Jones stood there listening, as if he had just witnessed his entire relationship, his brand, and his name burned to the ground, and he was unable to stop it. The question now is, was this all a hold on tight? Because what you're about to hear could spell the end of everything they've worked so hard to build. What's worse than a breakup? Did Camron play the long game from day one? Was Chrissy ever truly faithful? Or was she just a well-dressed time bomb waiting to go viral? Revealed treachery, which is just what happened between Chrissy Lampin Camron and Jim Jones. In a controversy that has not only completely upended Dipset, but also has the internet wondering, was everything a lie? It began like any other chaotics, internet.rumors, a few whispers, a dubious DM leak, and then all of a sudden, an audio file appears. This isn't just ordinary audio though. It's private time-stamped, an uncut video of Chrissy Lamin purportedly telling Camron, not Jim Jones, that she never stopped caring about him, sipping wine, laughing, and calling Jim Jones a brand rather than a guy. Yes, that statement alone destroyed 3 group conversations and made Twitter like a funeral. But let's go back a bit, since according to individuals close to Cam's team, this was a planned, cold-blooded release from Camron himself, not a slip or a retaliatory leak from a resentful buddy. The reason for this is that it appears that Cam has finished playing nice. As you can see from the friction between, for more than 10 years, Camron and Jim Jones have been seething beneath the surface. Once, the culture coveted their brotherhood, but behind the scenes economic disputes, creative disputes, and yes, women, caused a huge rift between them that has persisted to this day. Both parties have been playing it cool for years. Now, let's talk about the audio itself. According to people who have heard the entire version, it wasn't secretly recorded or pulled from a cloud. Chrissy's voice is crystal clear in this tape, with no distortion or edits. As she states, Jim Jones still thinks I'm in love with the idea of us. This is not just the 40-second viral film, which was taken in a private studio apartment where Cam and Chrissy purportedly connected 2 months ago. But he doesn't realize that I've been gone for a while. I'm with him in interviews, but when it's genuine, it's with you. Then she chuckles, and the camera says nothing. A lighter flick sounds, and a beat plays in the background. Like this isn't. Let's not pretend that Chrissy has been spotless. People have been suspicious ever since the Marin Hotel tape was published last year. Remember the grainy clip of her walking into a luxury suite at 2:14? This is just a scandal, and it's the soundtrack to sabotage. When Chrissy said it was, her cousin Cam denied everything. Jim Jones didn't even reply. But the audio now makes it obvious that Cam was present. I was with Reggie, who was suspiciously wearing a sweatshirt similar to Cam's. At one point in the audio, Cam asks her, "You ever feel guilty?" To which Chrissy replies, without missing a beat, "Not anymore, I gave him." Ghost. The deception was layered. If that wasn't enough, let's examine what else was in the leak. I've been doing me for 10 years now, and it seems like that entailed slipping behind Jim Jones, back with the one man he trusted the most. The problem is though, this wasn't just about sex or retaliation. It was about control. Chrissy had been moaning to former VH1 employees for years that she felt constrained by Jim Jones' image. One former producer stated that Chrissy wanted to change her image and stop being the co-star and instead be the primary act. Guess who gave that spotlight Camron? According to sources, Cam had been monitoring and watching Chrissy for months. According to one insider, Cam didn't just take her. He managed her like a CEO, removing a competitor's brand from the market. This leads us to Jim Jones, who discovered on livestream that he was not given a courtesy call or any prior warning. He was in the middle of discussing his new album when his assistant handed him a phone and whispered something in his ear, and Jim Jones froze. Instead of flipping a table or storming out, he simply shut down after playing the recording again and whispering, "That's her." Deepet fans everywhere realized at that point that this wasn't just a celebrity drama. This was a real-time breakdown of love, loyalty, and legacy. And it continued for a few moments. Mama Jones, Jim Jones' own mother, took to Facebook Live, her face swollen, her tone angry, and she wrote, "I told my son that she wasn't right, but he wanted his fairy as a result of the internet doing what it does." Deeper Reddit posts comparing the stolen audio to Chrissy's previous interviews have surfaced. One user shared a clip from a 2018 Breakfast Club interview in which Chrissy claims that Cam is like family. There's nothing like that between us. However, the receipts show that there may have been a purposeful brand transfer as well as a brand collapse, which is even more startling. Some people suspect that Chrissy and Cam were planning their own spin-off, secretly recording discussions, capturing clips, and compiling drama in real time to submit to streaming sites. They consider the raw side of hip-hop and love. When you learn that Cam's attorney just filed a motion to safeguard the intellectual property linked to recorded footage from July to October, it doesn't seem implausible that this leak is scandalous and entirely unscripted, substance, not proof. This is where things get shady. According to insiders, there are 2 more recordings, one of which is from a backstage VH1 shot, in which Chrissy is purportedly heard asking Mona Scott, "Can we remove that line about Jim Jones?" The second voicemail is a purported statement from Chrissy telling Cam, "I miss the old days when it was just us. Jim's too busy chasing clout, you still see me. It's not true anymore, I'm just acting." The final point is that it's now a meme that you still see me on shirts, TikTok lip syncs, and even spiteful tweets from random reality stars. It's also the hashtag of the week, and that's where we pause because, as the world began to respond to the leak, Camron himself broke his "You shouldn't have played both sides of that post" one, since he uploaded a single sentence on Instagram with no caption and only white letters on a black screen. 4 million likes in 9 hours with no follow-ups or hashtags. Just a digital microphone drop. But what happened? Next, even Cam was caught off guard when a Dropbox folder with screenshots, travel receipts, and a picture of Chrissy and Cam boarding a private jet to Turks and Chaos that same week was leaked by an unidentified burner account connected to a former VH1 intern, was admitted to the hospital due to weariness. That's what happened, and then the fuse was lighted once more, because contrary to what you would have assumed, the IG Live was only the dress rehearsal, and the audio leak was the climax. The courtroom was full, as Jim Jones entered wearing all black, without any shackles, without a smile, without any entourage, just his lawyer. And what transpired next wasn't just scandalous. It was deadly to the brand, the relationship, and every lie they believed would be buried forever. His mother, Mama Jones, was behind him. She was wearing a church coat, and brandishing tissues like weapons. Chrissy arrived 15 minutes later, her hair slicked back, her mouth clenched, and she was dressed as though she was going to a funeral she had caused. Perhaps she was, but the tension to a new level when Camron went inside, wearing a nice caramel leather trench coat and sunglasses. 2 steps after him, his lawyer was carrying another folder with the designation Exhibit C. The judge didn't waste any time in getting things done. In order to address the harm to the public caused by the now viral recordings, Jim Jones' attorney first stood up and asked for a gag order on all parties, citing premeditated defamation, emotional harassment, and brand exploitation. He then gave the court a printed copy of the order. The printed contract was an actual signed agreement between Jim Jones and Chrissy for the creation of a co-branded documentary series called Love Always Wins. It had provisions pertaining to exclusive representation, brand protection, and emotional integrity. Documents that stated, "You don't just break hearts, you breach contracts." The judge carefully went over each sheet before glancing straight at Chrissy. "Were you romantically connected with Mr. Giles?" Camron didn't blink or sigh when this series was being planned. Instead, she simply nodded once the word "yes" exploded in the courtroom, causing Mama Jones to cry out, sounding like a spirit departing the body. Jim simply glanced down, his palm clutched on the table, his knuckles white. "Were you aware that this relationship, if revealed, could damage the credibility of your co-branded content?" the judge said, lips quivering, and another person nodded, "Yes." The judge didn't respond, but that she doesn't even care, and maybe she didn't, because what happened next confirmed it. Interrupted a voice in the gallery as someone said, she cooked herself." Cam's lawyer approached the bench with calm words that sent a shockwave through the courtroom. "We'd like to submit one final recording." The judge granted it, and the bife rolled. This was the suspect that the internet had been yelling about for weeks. Everyone turned on a monitor, and it began to slowly static, before a voice said, "I'm tired of pretending that I love him, but not the way he needs Jim, once forever." And Chrissy, without makeup or glitter, was seated across from Yandandy Smith, in what appeared to be a production trailer. Cam gave me a moment, and Yandandy seemed uneasy and fidgety before saying, "You know this isn't gonna stay secret, right?" Chrissy sipped from a solo cup and chuckled. "If it leaks, it leaks. I've been hiding for 10 years after the courtroom fire returned." The screen went black, and no one moved, not even the judge, until he finally said, "Ms. Lemin, is this tape authentic, Chrissy? Do you realize that it calls into question your claims of good faith in your joint business ventures?" Chrissy, even though the gavel didn't fall, the damage did, because Jim's team filed a countersuit once the tape was made public, alleging emotional fraud, deliberate misrepresentation, and brand manipulation. The lawsuit wasn't just personal, it was now financial as well. Government, but just as things were getting too much to bear, a court clerk interrupted, whispering something in the judge's ear. The judge nodded, then said the words that converted the controversy into a potential criminal inquiry. Homeland Security has provided this court with material indicating that Ms. Lampkin is currently a subject of interest in a case concerning non-profit theft and digital manipulation related to footage mentioned in earlier hearings. Mona Scott's audible shock. The assistant in the rear, sitting calmly, dropped a folder on the floor. VH1's attorney instantly sprang up, saying, "Your Honor, we object. This is outside the jurisdiction of this case." The court dismissed the objection, noting that it would be addressed. Chrissy's attorney appeared to Chrissy, eventually appeared shaken after someone had pulled the battery out of his spine. Her eyes fell to the table, her hands began to quiver, and she spoke in a quiet voice, while Cam watched everything like a man. He directed himself at the film's debut, and Jim stood up, not out loud, not furious, just slowly and deliberately, walked to the middle of the courtroom, turned to face Chrissy, and asked, "Was any of it for me, or was I just the cover story?" The judge granted his request. Chrissy didn't respond, because she couldn't hear the silence that followed. It was the silence of a guy who realized his true love was only faithful to the plot, louder than the audio, louder than Cam's smirks, and louder than Mona's denials. Before Jim even left the courtroom, the judge requested a brief recess, but by then, the media was already on fire. The TMZ Shade Room and all of the crazy YouTubers were already splicing the footage into clips, and the hashtag was trending within minutes. Chrissy confesses that Cam was the one who threw Jim out of the plan, that Jim deserved more, and that VH1 revealed the Homeland Cam files. Then, while the court was on break, Camron's team posted a teaser trailer on Twitter, featuring a 30-second clip of Chrissy.Jim's on tour, talking on the phone in a hotel room, while sporting a pair of dips and a sweatshirt. "I have 2 hours. You coming or not?" he says, as the speaker on the other end goes downstairs. The screen changes to black text and fades in the video as they attempt to cover coming. The energy was radioactive shortly after the court returned, and the judge appeared, exhausted. He asked the opposing attorneys to make closing arguments before adjourning until the last motions could be examined the following week. But in reality, the verdict had already been made public. By the time Jim left the courthouse, his staff had already removed all of Chrissy's pictures from his social media accounts. Mama Jones declined to talk to the media, but she was there to see every confession Chrissy made and every comment in the press in his face. Weeping quietly in the hallway, Chrissy departed through a back exit. Cam remained in the courtroom, not leaving right away, but wearing a dark hoodie, big sunglasses, and the mute understanding that her truth had become a televised cautionary tale. When a journalist asked him, "Why now?" Cam simply chuckled and replied, "I waited for the right ending." He then exited the lobby, still grinning, while chatting to his lawyer and drinking coffee. As the titles rolled behind him, a few hours later, a final text thread from a burner phone that Chrissy sent to a contact, registered as MSY Mona Scott Young, was leaked online. The message said, "Delete everything." He knew it was done. However, nothing was removed. Everything was archived, and now it is part of the world's beloved tale dead. The brand crushed the truth, which will play on repeat for eternity. 30 minutes later, everyone was back in their seats, but this time, the atmosphere had changed, and nobody glanced at Chrissy. Jim Jones was sitting with his arms folded, with no expression on his face, no wrath, no heartbreak, and she sat there alone, as if the air around her had thinned, and guilt had finally set in. The judge, the court reporters, and even her own lawyer were not present. Didn't need to say anything more, because the truth had already spoken loudly for him. Then, as though the devil was taking a lunch break and had handed the case over to his assistant, the clerk returned with a flash drive, wrapped in an evidence bag, labeled HSI Homeland. This contains sealed surveillance audio and metadata files, referencing Ms. Lampkin, Ms. Scott Young, and the security investigations. The judge remarked as he opened it with his gloves like it was burning, inserted it into the courtroom system, and turned to face the room. Everyone sat motionless as Chrissy's lawyer objected right away. "Your Honor, this is not relevant to the current matter, but the management of charitable contributions linked to a VH1 affiliated nonprofit registered in 2021. The first file that played was Chrissy's voice again in a phone call background sound, which matched a trailer, probably backstage at a VH1 event. I ordered Mona to reroute it. The court shut it down again. We're not talking about innocence. We're talking about admissibility, and it's admissible. The rest went to handle post-production. Another voice said, "Female nervous Chrissy, that's fraud." Chrissy calmly replied, "No, that's television. Jim didn't need to know that we used his name to promote the event when Jim's name, likeness, and reputation were utilized in charitable materials to divert contributions back into unapproved production expenditures." The courtroom remained motionless because this was not only a betrayal of the heart, but also possible federal wire fraud. Jim's attorney stepped up. "Once more, Your Honor, we ask for your prompt approval to include these facts in our current motion for emotional sabotage and brand defamation." The judge acknowledged the motion as approved, and that's when VH1's attorney stood there looking pale and perspiring, whispering something to an aide, turned to the judge and requested permission to speak in chambers. The judge refused, stating that the matter was too large to be kept behind closed doors, and that it was public knowledge. The VH1 attorney stated, "We had no idea of the financial routing." When the judge inquired about the secondary production, logs or unapproved film, Ms. Scott Young, the representative, hesitated and said she was not available for comment. Of course, this was because Mona Scott Young had vanished, leaving no emails or public declarations. Even a mysterious Instagram quote, "She was almost halfway to the bunker and knew the tidal wave was approaching." But when the tsunami struck in court, Chrissy finally spoke, not to defend herself or deny anything, but to admit, and stood up by herself saying, "I messed up. I kept telling myself that I could balance the image and display my true sentiments. I believed that I could love him in public and recover in private, but I lost both sides of myself." She whispered it quietly, not to Jim or the judge, but to no one in particular. Jim didn't look at her. The judge let her continue, either out of curiosity or because this was the last page of a script. But once she did, I stopped being real with either of them. After that, it became a machine that showed something I couldn't get out of. She sat down and said, "I don't expect forgiveness from Jim, from the fans, from anyone, but I want the truth on record because I'm tired of hiding behind scenes." That was the last word she wanted to write about Chrissy. The judge spoke for nearly a full minute before stating that, due to the strength of the evidence, competing corporate interests, and the possibility of further injury to public institutions' reputations, this court will grant all applications for damages until a final hearing. Additionally, the non-profit case is being referred to federal authorities for additional investigation by this court. Although it was not yet concluded, Camron had already left emotionally and didn't wait for the final decision, posting one more thing to his story. She just said it louder than I could ever imagine beneath a clip from Dipset's. I mean, it played, and Chrissy left through the back again, this time without any security, no entourage, and no Mona Jim. Jim left last, and his team attempted to yank him toward a by sundown. The internet was on fire once more, after a leaked staff conversation from VH1 hit Reddit. He shook them off, stepped through the main door into the crowd, and saw cameras flashing, reporters screaming, but he didn't say a thing. He got into his SUV, locked the door, and drove away. Screenshots of Mona's final internal message before the scandal reached the courtroom were released by Inside Production. It said, "If that footage leaks, we're finished. Jim doesn't know half of what was scripted. Let legal handle the rest." The comments became viral, and she leveraged his trauma, as when the next Fire Festival approaches, A video that was posted anonymously revealed a deleted scene from the Netflix trailer that Jim and Chrissy were working on. Chrissy didn't lie on TV, she practiced it. He asked her, "Are you prepared to create a season or a life with me?" "Why not both?" she asked with a giggle. However, there is currently no season, no life, and no future. Netflix withdrew its sponsors and backed off, and the series production was put on hold in less than a day. Mona's name was removed from the website. VH1's press contact disappeared, and all interns who had ever been close to Chrissy Lampkin began cleaning their LinkedIn profiles by morning, as well as Dipset's official Instagram. Removed Chrissy from their follower list. Jim's bio stated, "Rebuilding. Don't ask me nothing." Chrissy merely uploaded a black square with no description or explanation, and thousands of people flooded into the comments section asking, "Was it worth it? You broke the last loyal one. Cam sold a story. You sold your soul." But Cam's announcement of the entire release of the footage, which they attempted to hide in a 3-part series that will be released next, was the cherry on top. In the trailer for Friday, Jim is shown sitting alone on a rooftop with a glass in a scene that was never shown. He says, "I've built my whole life trying to protect people who just needed a stage." The scene doesn't even open with Chrissy. Then, the concluding words, "The real story was never about love, but rather about loyalty, and who killed it first," are said as the stillness fades to black. There is nothing left to defend after the world watched in silence as they became addicted. Not the name, the picture, or even the past. Just 3 names, Jim, Chrissy, Cam, and a legacy that will never be able to move on because the video is out and will always be there. Now that everything is public, the confessions, the courtroom fall, and the videotape must question whether the love story we all supported was based on the loyalty Dipset claimed to be founded on, or if it was all a meticulously crafted delusion put together by producers using secrets and marketed to us as permanent. Because Jim Jones didn't simply lose, he lost his legacy, and Chrissy entered the courtroom and destroyed it, one quote, one voicemail, one silence at a time. Camron, on the other hand, didn't simply leak a tape. Instead, he lit the entire thing on fire and left. Now it's your time. Do you think Chrissy ever loved Jim, or did she just use him to establish her brand? Was Cam her rescuer or her strategy? Please share your views in the comments below. If you're still with us, hold back and hit the like button while still in shock. Preserve this tale. And if you'd want every courtroom twist, every leaked tape, each covert betrayal, prior to the hit subscribe and the internet buries it, ring the bell, as this story is far from finished, and the subsequent disclosure could simply revise everything you believed you knew what.